Hello Buttercup, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is 12, yes 12, modern books I think will be classics in 20 years. Now, I don't want to spoil any of these books, so it's not going to be an in-depth conversation for each one, and if I did, that would be a very long video. We're just trying to do an overview. Also, these are books that I have in fact read. I've seen a few of these types of videos where the person didn't read one or more of these books. To each their own, but I've read all of these books that I'm going to talk about briefly, and some of them you'll probably disagree with. I'm just saying that they're all fabulous, and I hope that they would be modern classics in 20 years or less. So let's go for the first book. It's actually a trilogy, and I think a lot of people will agree. The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Why? Because I read this actually in college. It took me to a whole other world, and I really resonated with the writing and Katniss. Though some people I know find Katniss to be harsh. I mean, she's a teenager in the Hunger Games, and then she was assigned to be the chosen one, so she has a lot of problems. I had a lot of problems when I was reading this novel, or the trilogy actually, and I think nearly every age group can read the Hunger Games trilogy, and it will resonate. It makes sense, it's enjoyable, it's relatable, and that's why I think, even though it's a young adult trilogy, I think if a trilogy can expand to all age groups, this needs to be classified as a modern classic novel. And I'm pretty sure it's almost at 20 years, so we'll see how that goes. Number 2, My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is a story about a teenager. We go back and forth between Vanessa, the teenager, and her being in her 30s, and her grappling with being groomed and SA'd by her teacher, and the after effects of that whole situation. I think this should be read by as many people as possible, even though it's extremely difficult at times, but it doesn't shy away from the truth, and it's also through the point of view of the victim. And though Lolita is talked about in My Dark Vanessa, I think My Dark Vanessa does a service for victims of SA, because can you find another book that is literary fiction on par with Lolita? I think that it's way more important to have My Dark Vanessa on your bookshelf compared to Lolita. Lolita is a classic. It is. It's disturbing. That's the whole point. That's the same for My Dark Vanessa, but it's through the victim's lens and how she is trying to even just accept that what happened is not love. It's grooming and it's abuse, and it was not her fault. And I think that's very powerful. Number 3, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Very flowery, and so I know a lot of people, including myself, couldn't give The Song of Achilles a 5-star read. However, I will absolutely take flowery prose if the story is fantastic, and it was fantastic, people. I think a lot of people love Madeline Miller at this point. She can deliver a great story, and I was really feeling some feels when I was reading The Song of Achilles. Number 4, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. This is the Appalachian version of David Copperfield. Demon Copperhead did it better. Hot take. This is newly released, so it's gonna take like 17, 18 more years as of this video publishing for it to be a modern classic, but it has already won many, many awards. It is about 500 and so pages. However, it flies by. We follow Demon. His name's Damon, but he is actually Melusian in the Appalachians, and this is a very specific ethnic group because they are Black, white, and Native American, and so he's Demon because he has red hair. His skin tone is darker. His eyes are either green or blue. So it is very interesting for the people around him. And so that's why his nickname is Demon. But he's not a bad person. I love Damon. If I say Demon/Damon, it's the same person. I'm so sorry. If I were to meet him, I would just give him a big hug. This goes through life in the Appalachians, being poor, being in the foster care system, having parents that are neglectful, but also going through their own demons, and therefore that's why they're neglectful. And we talk heavily about the opioid pandemic that is not spoken about when it was happening in the 90s and early 2000s and even today. And I was so enraptured by Demon Copperhead that I forgot that Barbara Kingsolver wrote Demon Copperhead, because she writes Demon so well. You pulled him out of the book and you slapped him into reality. He is fully formed human being. That is an amazing, amazing feat for a writer. And I just appreciate Demon Copperhead because it's giving voice to those in the Appalachians, where a lot of my family members are from and still are there. And yes, they're very poor. There's a lot of problems going on in that area, and finally someone's talking about it, but in a very moving and beautiful way through Demon Copperhead. Number 5, Bunny by Mona Awad. I took quite some time to finish this novel. It's 300 pages, maybe a little bit over, but it took me 3 months because Mona Awad does an amazing job at writing the main character as stable and then very quickly switching to unstable and then switching to, are you on drugs? Or is this a dream? Or what's going on? I'm a little confused, but oh my gosh, I need to finish this book. It's very interesting. It really was. I need to only read 30 pages or so at a time after a certain point, or else I would feel high. And do you know how hard that is to accomplish? And I'm not the only one that thought that way. You go on Goodreads or Amazon, many people saying, I felt like I was high when I was reading this book. That is the whole point of Bunny. And there are many hypotheses about the meaning of Bunny. And you could write so many graduate level papers on Bunny. It's that great. Number 6, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. That's the first book in the Emily Wilde trilogy. I just went with the first book because that's usually how you go about these things. And the third book is not out. I would have done the trilogy, but you know, we all have to wait for the third book in the Emily Wilde series. But I wanted to include at least the first book. This follows a very grumpy, but you learn to love her, fairy scholar. And this is very new. This whole series is very new, but it is a huge hit. It is cozy fantasy, which is new on the market, whatever you want to say, new to us. How about that? And it has really, I think, defined the cozy fantasy subgenre. And I just love all the feels. I love how Heather Fawcett writes all the things, but especially fairies. She does follow the myths, legends, folklores of fairies pretty closely, and we always appreciate that. And that book, those books, I should say, are like a warm hug. And sometimes you need a warm hug. It doesn't have to be a very serious and depressing book for it to be a classic. I will argue that for the rest of my life. Sometimes the books that stick with you the most are the ones that make you feel warm and tingly inside. Maybe, you know, don't make that nasty. But what I'm saying is cozy fantasy, it's on the rise for a reason. And I think Emily Wilde's book series does it the best. Number 7, Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty. I first saw the TV show on HBO Max. I'm late to the game, okay? That was last year, 2023. And I loved that show. So I got the book and I was a little hesitant, but I ate it up, everyone. Sometimes you just need a good contemporary novel. And the idea is fairly simple. And you wouldn't think that it could expand into what it is. But the writer does a fantastic job doing so. So let's see what happens 20 years and beyond and what they think about Big Little Lies. Number 8, Mayfly by C.J. Lead. This is a extreme horror, traditionally published novel that is, I will argue, to the end of my days, better than American Psycho. It is satirical, but it doesn't read annoyingly. Sometimes there are satires that are trying to talk about modern times and they lose the plot. But Mayfly does not lose the plot, and I think we need to have a classic horror novel from the 2020s, published in 2023. So she's got 19 years to settle into everyone's mind and then have it become a classic. I was enraptured. I was obsessed. I am still obsessed and absolutely love Mayfly. And the writer has gotten a lot of pushback for whatever reason on the content, but extreme horror, I don't know what to tell you. It is what it is. Even if it just says horror, yeah, there's horrible things. And so therefore, extreme horror, extremely horrible things. So this is probably the only book on this list that I will say caution before reading it. Number 9, My Dear Hamilton by Stephanie Dray. I read this quite some time ago. It's not even that quite some time ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. You know, that feels like a lot after a certain age, so I'm gonna go with it. I really loved learning about Eliza Hamilton, which is the wife of Alexander Hamilton. I am always intrigued by the women that had little to no rights, but they were still very strong and as independent as you could at the time. And definitely Team Eliza, not Team Hamilton, after reading what he did. It was a tragedy that he was killed in a duel, so I think this book shows that people are human and you mess up and you love people and you hate people, and then you also are like, I'm disappointed, but yeah, I still love you. And I'll support you no matter what. Usually, okay, that was a little much. You need to apologize to me. This type of the vibe of My Dear Hamilton. But also, knowing that Eliza really couldn't divorce, we're here. We're going through her journey with her. And I really appreciated Stephanie Dray focusing on Eliza Hamilton because she's often overlooked, because Alexander Hamilton, huge figure in American history. Number 10, Piranesi. I probably pronounced that wrong. I have been trying to do the phonics of Susanna Clarke's novel, but I actually just call the character Nessie because that word does not work in my mind and it doesn't translate well at all. But I recently just read this novel. I was intrigued throughout the whole novel. The first 100 pages, I did not know where it was going. And then by, the middle, I saw what was going on. And I think, once again, you can write at least 4, maybe 6 different topics within a grad school paper about this novel. Really have to read carefully, really pay attention, or else you will miss things, and then, things later on don't make sense. And you could read it many, many times and pick up things that you missed. Number 11, Circe by Madeline Miller. Once again, I think that Madeline Miller created a fantastic book. This has even more flowery language compared to the Song of Achilles, and there are some parts where it's a little slow. However, I think that was probably done on purpose because Circe is alone on an island and you're in her mind. You're kind of like her. You are her on this island, bored out of your mind, trying to survive, trying to not have an existential crisis every 5 minutes. So I was feeling for Circe. I really was. I was like, oh my gosh, you're doing your absolute best. But sometimes that's not good enough because you're stuck and you can't get out of the situation that you're in. And the only communication is with a particular god and then whoever comes on to Circe's island. And that whole situation, if you know about Circe, is expanded on and done very well in this novel. I won't spoil it for you just in case you don't know about the people that come on her island and what happens. I think that's very moving and difficult to read, yes, but also Madeline Miller does a fantastic job writing that situation out. And lastly, number 12, Mouse by Art Spiegelman. That's a graphic novel. It's the first graphic novel on this list. And it's a little older. Actually, you know what? It could also be coming up on 20 years, if not 20 years old. So automatically it gets to be literature with a capital L. Classic. That's just my opinion. I read this in college, actually, for American literature class. Love that professor. This was around the time where you have exams and the professor was like, I know you all are having your mid-semester exams. We're having one in 2 days. I'm gonna give you all a break and assign you 2 graphic novels, and this one was the first graphic novel assigned. And I ate it up. I was horrified, crying, just feeling all the feels. There was even parts where I smiled and laughed, and that is what makes a graphic novel story resonate with people. That at one moment you're crying and then the next moment you're laughing along after a very hard and disturbing scene. Thank you so much for watching my 12 picks for modern books I think will be classics in 20 years. I hope you had a great time. Please comment with your thoughts about any and all of these books, and if you think any other books should be in the classics book list in 20 years that I might have missed. Thank you for watching once again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!